Hello, everybody. Welcome to a deeper conversation with Deanna and George. Today, we wanted to talk about the game of life versus living. And this is a concept that Dr. George Pransky of Pransky and Associates, and I think his website is pranskyandAssociates.com,
Yeah.
and we'll try to put the link in below in the subscription in the comments section. Dr. Pransky is a pioneer of the three principles. He talks about the game of life versus living, and we're going to explore that concept a little bit today and tell you a little bit about what it means in general, and then what it means to each of us and what we take away from it. And hopefully, after our discussion, you'll think about it and what it means to you, because as we keep saying, it doesn't really matter what we think at the end of the day, it matters what you think as well. So, George, do you want to explain a little bit about the game of life versus living?
Yeah, thanks, Diana. Hello, everyone. Always a pleasure to have this conversation. Like Diana said, the game of life and living is, I think it's a wonderful concept or a wonderful illustration by Dr. George Pransky. And I had the opportunity of listening to, how he articulated what he called living and the game of life. So basically, from my understanding, the game of life is a description of everything that we do in life, everything we are engaged in. So it could be our roles, our individual roles, a job, it could be a business, it could be anything that you're engaged in, that you're doing that has, certain constraints. It could be a game of maybe football or soccer or tennis. It could be a relationship. It could be anything that we're engaged in as human beings is part of the game of life. Now, he also made a distinction with living. Living, like he said, is our ability to derive satisfaction or happiness in every moment to moment, because living is a continuous state. As long as we're alive, you know, we're living. And it's the experience of living that is the distinction he's making here. And interestingly, he also attributed the the fact that when we were kids or children, have this ability to be very high on the living scale. So they they can derive a higher level of satisfaction and happiness regardless of the situation they find themselves in, regardless of what is going on around them or what they're engaged with. But when we don't see the distinction, we go around looking for the kind of satisfaction that we can only get from living. We go seeking it in what we're doing in the game of life. So it could be in our jobs or in our relationships or in whatever challenges or whatever things we're facing in the game of life. And because the game of life is set up in a way that is supposed to help us self actualize, it's supposed to challenge us to bring out the best in us, not to necessarily give us any feeling of satisfaction that is not fleeting, right? Then it ends up becoming like a wild goose chase. We keep seeking higher and higher accomplishments because we think that we will get the satisfaction we crave from them. And when we don't get when that doesn't happen, we keep seeking more and more accomplishments, thinking that eventually it will come. But when we see this distinction clearly, at least for me, from the little I've seen from the way he described it, it frees us up to realize that, you know, as long as I know that my well-being is not tied to what I do or how well I do in the game of life, then I'm free to go and do whatever it is that appeals to me, and do it to the best of my ability, and keep improving, and keep getting better, keep challenging myself, with the knowledge that my level of satisfaction and happiness, and it's not is not tied to how well I do in the game of life.
I think that's an important distinction. And for me, I am having a little bit of trouble at times understanding the whole concept of living, because for my entire life, I think I've been caught up in the game of life. And the game of life to me is, society's rules or thoughts that you have or have been given to you by others about who you really are, even though who you are is more in the living concept, and it's your core self. And you're always going to be that regardless of what other people say. There's this part of you that is infinite and existed before time, will exist after time, is just there. When you're accessing that, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay no matter what anybody says or does, or how many achievements you've created. You're still going to be you, and you're still going to be okay, and you're still going to have the ability to be happy. And in the game of life, we chase after things like a dog goes after a stick, and we're always trying to get that stick. And whether it's a degree or a person, like in a relationship or whatever, the game has these sort of rules, but and we think if we abide by them, we'll get them. And then when we get that person or get that degree, we it feels hollow or empty, like, wait, I thought I'd be happy if this. And then when that doesn't happen, we start to realize, well, maybe happiness is something more or something different or something that doesn't come outside. And that's, where the whole concept of the inside out comes in. And that's another topic we'll talk about another time. But everything you have or need to be happy is here within already. So, like, for example, I'm not a great cook. I've been told that. I've also experienced it with my cooking, but I still enjoy experimenting, and I'm going to continue to experiment and live as a cook, because it's something that brings me enjoyment. So it's not dependent upon the results. It may not be a tasty result, but it's still, I had fun while I was cooking. I made time for that kind of possibility, that the play aspect. And George had a really good concept of the playground. And I'm not sure if you want to speak a little bit more about that or not.
Yeah, I think he used an illustration. He used tennis to illustrate the difference between the game of life and living. So, like in any game, for it to be a game, there has to be constraints. There has to be rules. There has to be, you know, a beginning and an end. So for tennis, you have to, there has to be a net, the lines that say, okay, if the ball drops outside this line, is out, and it has to drop within this line for you to score a point. And the goal is to eventually get a winner and a loser. Now, that's a game. That's a definition of a game. And the same way in business or in life or in a job or in a relationship, we make up rules or boundaries and say, okay, if you want to do this, you want to engage in this particular thing, this is how it works. Or even if you make up your own, you still have to put certain boundaries. So this is my business. This is what I'll do. I'll work with this kinds of people. I will do this, and you set it up in a way that enables you to achieve your aim. So it's a game in that sense. Now, living, on the other hand, in the analogy of playing tennis, living will be the equivalent of the amount of satisfaction and pleasure you derive just from hitting the ball, regardless of whether it falls inside the line or outside, or it hits the net, or whether you score a point or not. The sheer joy, or the sheer satisfaction of engaging in the act of hitting the ball, it could be equated to living. But that's what we crave, because if it's the moment to moment satisfaction, you derive that from just engaging in hitting the ball, then at the end of the day you might want to win. But even if you don't win, it doesn't take away, you still enjoyed the game, right? It doesn't take away the satisfaction of the whole game, right? So it's the same approach to being in life. As you're living is the satisfaction, the total moment to moment satisfaction we derive from our experience of life, regardless of what job you're doing, regardless of what your business is, regardless of whether your business is doing well or not, regardless of what relationship you're in. Those things are all part of the game. But in living, it is just like we also use the analogy of little kids, and how they derive tremendous amount of satisfaction from, whatever situation they find themselves in. It's hard to get them low on the living scale. They just instinctively know that life is a mystery to be experienced. It's not a problem to be solved. They just experience life, and it's an experience to be savored regardless of what's going on. And I think a lot of us miss that distinction as we grow older, and life becomes very scary and serious and dangerous and boring. So many things just look different, and you look at a lot of adults and look at kids, and it seems like we're from different planets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's we all have what they have, because we are all once kids. And so that distinction um, has really helped me tremendously, and maybe we'll expand on that a little later.
Yeah, it definitely is something we should expand on at another point. But I really think of like living as enjoying the experience, regardless of the outcome. And then the game of life, you're more outcome focused. And your feeling or your experience of the actual experience is based on whether you did good or bad or succeeded or failed or whatever. It's creating these kind of concepts and rules. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. We all have to play the game of life to an extent, but we don't have to get so caught up in the game that we're not enjoying our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can't get the satisfaction of living from the game of life.
Right.
You can't get that because the game of life is artificial. It's made up. We make it up. We make it up to challenge ourselves, to push ourselves, to self-actualize, to fulfill our potential because we are innately full of creative potential. That's who we are at our core. And the game of life is an outlet for that potential to emerge, for us to express our creativity, to express ourselves in the world. So it's absolutely essential. It's really very important to engage in a game of life. But there is no intrinsic value in the game itself. We can't derive satisfaction, the kind of satisfaction that every human being craves, cannot be derived from the game of life. It's in seeing that distinction that we are free to really engage in whatever game we're playing and give it our best.
Yep. So we're willing to play, and that's live, regardless of what the rules are for a game of tennis, a game of chess, a game of soccer, or a game of football. The rules might change, but regardless of whether that happens, if we're living our lives, we're going to know that no matter what happens out there, inside, we're still okay. Inside,
Yeah.
we're still who we are, and we're always going to be that. And it's just that concept of finding some people call it centering or grounding or whatever, but it's just knowing at your core that the experience is not the end all. There's something deeper, something more. And I think that is something that you will discover on your own. And George and I have given you sort of what we think on our end. But as we always like to say, it's up to you to decide how to apply it or use it in your own life, or even to just think about it. All we're asking you to do is think. And we'd love your comments below. We'd love to answer them. We'd love to point you in different directions. I guess in closing, I say thank you. George, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I would really encourage, our viewers to check out the audio, The Game of Life and Living by Dr. George Pransky is at www.pranskyandAssociates.com. You can get the MP3 and listen so you get a better idea of what we're doing. So thank you, and
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.